생각이 저 상축 세는지 네 그래서 이봐 이답들 라송 이답을 라시바 강이니 혼데 군제세 뭐 도제지소 혼데 그제세 뭐 도제지 저들이 다 라응 도제 창송구요래 얘네 도제 저 도제 시바에다가 새 도제 라송 요래 내라들이 시바만 거요래 랑아 요래 메토다마 제 요래 랑아 되더니 자와르가 총바 딱바라 자와르가 마다바라 유몽통아 레 니 중앙아 양송구요래 니 도지게 니 라사드네 비만다마 제다데 선바제 만지다마 선마제 도나들이 남지 초제 되는 총구요래 그 도지들 세부 실내 참아 참여를 돼 도지에지 도지 시바드니 깨깨미 봐 저라미 봐 포절미 봐 생코는 아시지 도지 장송에 생코는 아시 저라미 봐 때려지 도지서 도저 봐래 지들이 콘테 근저세 보 도지 장데 콘테 근저세 봐는 코야 생고서 그래 상지야 생고서 그래 상지 생기냐 생고서 그래 그래서 동보페 잡아는 일이 동보대 야기와들은 야가론다 메도 제베 마스와트 사와서 터스나 그래서다 이제 동보고 짜와 되는 다 그런 거 동해요 동보치가 쌓이는 누가 동해요 토리는 라다메 공방에서 되는 다톡 상지 내가 토리 다톡 상지 공방지 이 세부배 짜와 참아시바 참아도 도제를 참고요 내가 새 도제를 참에 나도 같이 도제를 짜지 모르지 정도 제 나라 정도다 템들이 대바이 되는 도제를 내려고 세면 봐 세면 되다고 용띠용 봐 이쁘게 시바잖아 될 도제를 시바자 사람이 도제를 나라도 편도요 말에 대시죠 도제 대시티제들이 도제 라 예빨 도지고야 라 정말 저요 도제 저이데 저도 도지 송바이 도제 탑는 게 뭐 너는 이게 송고래 도저지데 도저 야마다송 도저 라면 초제데 센들 이게 마다와지 송 센들이 삼는지 마다나 그래서다지 도저도 탑시송 조송 일처럼 생각을 하시더니 이제 함이 이제 연구요래 지원한테 되는데 단지 이제 몇 봐서 요래 다지들로 되게 혼자 말을 봐서 말을 되더니 말을 봐도 다래 어떻게 동무들은 콘데니 제보도 소리 샘리지 되고라고요 오 샘들 라라 아치바 차르고 라라만 코아 차르고 이 멋지 샘지 바리 제대로 잡아요 제대로 안 코아 차르고 제대 재미치 양 뭐자요 제대로 재미를 잡아 차르지 요한으로지 샘거도 딴 것대로 정도 샘코는 각각 말해야지 산지 샘다 샘지 샘다 가서 샘지 뭐 샘코는 요함에 비 도지에지 도지에지
So, of the fivefold path of Mahamudra, this is the first one, Bodhichitta, and then the second one is the Yidam deity, and so in the second verse it begins with Vajraholder, the originator of samsara and nirvana, primordially perfected Yidam. There's also the deity called Vajradhara, which means the Vajra holder. But so this term Vajra, what does that mean? So externally, we often hold a Vajra in our hands. So we hold it as an implement. And there are many ways of explaining the meaning of a Vajra. Its outer appearance. So for example, there's the 5 prongs of the Vajra, and then has 8 petals of a lotus flower. So the 5 prongs of the Vajra, from a pure perspective, represent the 5 Dhyani Buddhas, and in an impure state, they are the 5 poisons, the afflictive emotions, and they also represent the 5 elements. Then the 8 lotus petals on the Vajra, has kind of 2 parts, the upper and the lower parts of the lotus petals, and the upper parts of the lotus petal represent the 8 bodhisattvas, and the lower parts, the 8 female bodhisattvas, or also we can say the 8 kinds of consciousness. And so the Vajra, in brief, is a representation of one's own mind. It is all, the nature of the mind, its qualities are complete within the representation of the Vajra. So the ultimate Vajra is the nature of mind that is not born and doesn't die and is unchanging. That is called the Vajra, or also Vajradhara, or the Vajra holder. So the Vajra holder refers to the unchanging nature of the mind. And so then it says the originator of samsara and nirvana. So the creator of samsara and nirvana. Samsara is created by the mind, and so is nirvana. A Buddha is created by the mind. The mind creates both Buddhas and sentient beings. It is just like the example of the tree I mentioned before, where you have the upper parts, the flowers and the branches and the leaves, and then you have the lower parts of the tree, the root. So that is a kind of a symbolic of when we are lower, and the lower realms, when we are sentient beings, there is suffering. So even though it is all one single tree, the beings in the 6 realms experience suffering. And then the upper part of the tree is representative of the temporary states of the higher realms, such as those of gods and humans, and then the ultimate state of enlightenment. So there are many ways to explain the Vajra, but in brief, it is an example, an illustration of the mind itself. So people like to hold Vajra as an implement in their hand because they think it is a very precious object. And of course, that is in itself also an act of devotion. But we need to understand that what the Vajra actually represents is one's own mind, the quality of one's own mind. And there is no benefit in only holding it in one's hands. So often, when used as an implement, we hold the Vajra in our right hand and the bell in our left hand. And the bell is a sign of emptiness, and the Vajra is a sign of the skillful means of great compassion. And holding Vajra and bell in both hands, in brief, means that you should never separate from emptiness and compassion, or skillful means and wisdom. So when you never separate from love and compassion, you are unifying method and wisdom. And then, having unified method and wisdom, compassion, like innate compassion, will arise from your mind naturally. And that compassion destroys self-grasping, the self-cherishing mind. And that is ignorance. Ignorance is equivalent with self-grasping, is a self. So this originator, was creator of samsara and nirvana, to put it in simple terms, is the mind. The mind creates both samsara and nirvana. And so even though we have the same mind, some turn out to be Dharma practitioners, and some turn out to be more samsaric beings. Or for example, there is some who in the earlier parts of their lives are ordained, are monks, and then in the later parts of their life become a layperson. So they're kind of holding a samsaric life. And so this change is also just the way the mind kind of goes. But there is no separate kind of mind. It's still the same mind. The mind of a Buddha and the mind of a sentient being is one and the same. But then this adamantine, changeless mind, as it is the natural state of mind, is what we refer to as the vajra. There's one, I think I missed to mention before, in the first, regarding the first verse of Bodhichitta. And so actually we should also relate these verses to the commonly known verses on the fivefold path of Mahamudra that we are always reciting. And so regarding Bodhichitta, the verse is, unless the horse of altruism runs for the benefit of others, it will not be rewarded at the end by the gods and humans. Therefore, apply yourself diligently in the preliminaries. So that is to say that the preliminaries of all Dharma practice is the altruistic mind. That is what accomplishes the benefit of self and others. So that is the wish of thinking, always thinking, may I be of benefit to others. Whether it is in the Dharma sense or in a worldly sense, no matter in any circumstance, whatever you do, may it be of benefit to others. For example, if you're a scientist, the scientists are fabricating cars. Now, if the scientist thinks, the one who is not the mechanic or so who creates that car thinks that I'm doing this so that others benefit. I have to make many cars so that many beings will benefit. May this be of benefit to others. So if the manufacturer thinks in this way, then the activity becomes an altruistic activity, a great merit. And that merit will grow stronger and increase. On the other hand, if the manufacturer of the car has a selfish attitude and thinks that I have to make many cars so that I can have a good profit, then there is half of that activity then becomes still meritorious, but the other half becomes a negative, a selfish activity. There still is benefit because the cars in the end do bring benefit and happiness to others. And once that is accomplished, there will be a corresponding result ripening. It is just a question of the magnitude of the result, which becomes enhanced if there is an altruistic intention. So if there's an altruistic intention, even in a worldly sense, for example, when scientists develop different things that make the world just become more developed and advanced, then a lot of merit is accumulated because these things bring about great benefit and happiness to others. But also, on the other hand, the same kind of science can be applied without any altruism and with a selfish attitude, and then it also leads to a lot of suffering in the world. For example, when the intelligence is used to create atomic bombs or nuclear weapons and so forth. So there can always be two kind of end results depending on the motivation, benefit or harm. And that depends on the motivation one has when one fabricates these things. So even in a worldly sense, we can see that. And so then also regarding this verse of Bodhichitta, there's another verse by Jigten Sumgön, that where Jigten Sumgön sang 4 the vajra songs of realization, and these words are actually very profound, each and every one of these verses. And so that the first verse corresponding to Bodhichitta says, or the vajra song says, when you donning the armor of Bodhichitta is the perfect mind generation of the Mahayana. So donning the armor of Bodhichitta means to have this ongoing, continuous wish to be of benefit to others. For example, if two people are together, then you would think that I have to treat my companion well and I have to make us be stable together. And so on. So if you think in this way, if you never separate from this altruistic wish, then bodhicitta arises from that. So that's the essence of the first verse, to never separate from this mind of altruism.
람랑 쇼도 저거 요래 따데 칼로서 보지는 인피로 다다 예도 좀 고차고 싶어데 샘도 맞다버리 롱 따데 롱 다버리 롱데 따다버리 들들 다다 이식을 롱 싶어데 다 샘디 따데 가래지 핀샘도 따다버리 피고 선리 딜로데 딜레가 가서 가래지나들이 야생고발때 빠지를 초소체로 생고만 사바다 니시로 요래 다상보다 아콘도래 피고 살이 따대 나 사바다 되게 나 조고서 조이나 그자야가 말하고 가리를 칼라는 말하고 나 조인사 나 직자지 보인사 대란지데 내가도 도도 차대디 차로차 진짜 남로가는 정도로 되는 바도니한테니 레롱의 이식을 놓니 제발에 레롱 짓을 돌아 레롱 지로냐면 레롱 짓을 놓나 로가를 돌아 나와 차는 거지 랑레 박차 가리사 디스 나와 차는 거지 이식을 놓는데 다다 라는 짓을 베베티 이시지 당연히 매와데 돈다고 따와도 되면 상적적 지피를 놓되는 니가 토리단 자와메 받들 다도 사제션 칼레들이 고마도고 요래 되는 디 상적적 따디 난 샘디 이제 형들 샘디를 슬피고 소리 때따래 때사적스고 따래 조금아예 사들이 아이 사들 뒤뒤 사촉촉이 저 여보들 내들 저저 사와야보다 나지를 저러고 요래 이지 용대시는 이지 좀 라고 용대마다 이지 좀마다서 이지 좀때 어디 좀때 돈 때때 세상은 거래 대변은 이지 용대다 라고 좀다 이렇게 때때들이 몇주 상보다만 약고 차로래 这切的是用可能存把腾起人存把，这切的是用这个我查着的，上中是的大别就把这个，东铁的大的弄的个现在，然后那边是真是有没劲那边呢，让工作用不啦，这种的人，那把真是个哈过，让多给把这钱，让多给把利息哈过，这让他考虑就但是的。真是没不大了，这大卡罗巴的这你莫这个往个做成，这那个桌上不对了，拉上这开张车子拉上说这里就上了全把掐住了，拉上大东西，大着这两个大的他身为，这那多的嘞，那多的嘞，那个大的，这里大件你没玩过，也是龙松，也是个龙当，你们个龙你边的，来龙的，你们来龙了个嘞，来这龙那这不讲的。这两年前的真是有名一般的，这把到里这那个他拖不拖的，来龙就是马上话的，也是个龙就是让他把对的他两年前的这叫我的大的别的，他哪个大的哈过的，哪个大哈过来的。
So, Jigten Sumgön likens the mind of Bodhichitta to this horse, or like a steed. And these are very profound words, and you should really think about them carefully. So the excellent horse can bring you anywhere. Like in the old days, we didn't have cars to travel. We had to go on a horseback. And so the person who is traveling, the person who goes, is one's inner mind. And then the horse is the wind energies, and that brings you all over the place. So there's two kinds of winds. There's the karmic winds and the wisdom winds. If we follow the karmic winds, then we will wander in the 6 realms of samsara. So this horse of the karmic winds will bring you all over down into the 6 realms of samsara. It is the path of where we become controlled by the 6 afflictive emotions. On the other hand, if you have an excellent horse that is donned with the armor of altruism, a wish to benefit others, then this horse will bring you to the higher states of existence. So again, the mind is the person, and the horse is the winds. And the wisdom winds, the horse that is the wisdom winds, is the altruistic mind. The thought of, may I benefit others. So that is the horse that we want to follow. And if you follow that horse, if you're riding that horse of altruism, then that will manifest as devotion to the higher beings, and in this way become an accumulation of merit. And also it will manifest as love and compassion for sentient beings. So this is where the excellent horse then brings you to the state of altruism. So there is this horse of altruism where you always think, may I be of benefit to others. And then, on the other hand, there is the horse of the karmic winds, and that is where you think, I'm most important. For example, there's 2 friends, you're with your friend, and you always think, I want to have whatever is better, like I want to have the better food and so on, because I'm most important, I'm very precious. Then the mind solidifies into this hardened like bundle, or like an ice block. And in this way, having solidified in this way, having hardened in this way, you enter the corrupt path, the wrong path. And that is very significant in the bardo after you have died. There is a big difference at that point, as in of whether you are following the karmic winds or the wisdom winds. If you follow the karmic winds in the bardo, that will lead to the manifestation of the 6 realms of samsara. Whatever karmic imprints have been stored in the mind, they will manifest at this point. And the wisdom winds, wisdom means the realization that self and other are non-dual, or we call that the ultimate view, having realized the ultimate view. Or on a relative level, it can also mean the wisdom winds can also refer to Bodhichitta, the altruistic mind. And that will bring you temporarily to the states of the higher realms. You will never be born in the lower realms. And ultimately, slowly, you will attain enlightenment. So this is the horse of Bodhichitta. And it is the mind that wishes to benefit others. And if you think that I'm most important, then you're riding the horse of karmic winds. For example, if you think that I'm most important, then whatever small thing you do, whatever small thing, like small good thing you do, you take much pride in it, and you think that I accomplished this, and then there's this constant thought of I did this and I did that, and in this way, and this kind of beneficial attitude turns into pride. Actually, it also is said, do not look at your own good qualities and do not look at the faults of others. Because if you're looking at the faults of others, anger arises from that. Instead, what you should do is look at the good qualities in others and look at your own faults. A person who does that, they will become pure and good-hearted people. And in this and in future lives will be in harmony with all, and there will be positive results in this and future lives. So this is the example of the horse. So the horse is the winds, and then the one who rides the horse, the person, is the mind. And you want to ride the horse of altruism, which is a mind of freedom or autonomy. For example, a person who possesses mindfulness, even if they become afflicted, even if they get angry, for example, they will recognize the affliction with mindfulness, and seeing the negativity in their own minds, they are able to immediately transform it and turn it around. On the other hand, somebody who lacks mindfulness, they follow the horse of the karmic winds, as in they become controlled by the afflictive emotions. So, for example, even though two partners are together and get along well, if a disagreement arises, then instantly they get angry at each other and they speak to each other harshly in an unkind way, and they become unharmonious. So this is what happens when we become controlled by the karmic winds. We are riding the horse of the karmic winds. We become controlled by the afflictive emotions. So that is what we call now the difference between the karmic winds, which are the afflicted winds, and the wisdom winds, which are the winds of having realized the non-duality of self and others. And so that is really what practice comes down to. And that is really what will determine whether or not we become liberated in the bardo. So it all comes back to whether or not you practice mindfulness. If you practice mindfulness, you will be able to follow the wisdom winds. So this is the example of the two kinds of horses, and which is an inner example referring to the mind, and it's important to understand this. So it also says that Bodhichitta is kind of what leads to there's the great renown or kind of fame of Bodhichitta, and so of course in the world we can be either famous or we can be infamous. So those who are famous is like this refers here to a positive kind of renown. and that is someone who accomplishes the benefit and happiness of sentient beings. And of course, there's also a few infamous people in the world who do the contrary. But for example, now an example of a great renown is that the Tibetan population in the world, for example, is about 6 million Tibetans, and so they are like one person that is like one renowned person that have a good renown. And why is there a good renown? It is because of accomplishing the benefit and happiness of others.
Mahamudra Rinpoche do the young of Yidam Jerem Lasson. Do the same Koran Raji Zama Tela, the Yunti put up the Bodhichitta, Yunti Yore, the very list of the Yidam Tapata, the Mangosongo, the very take that. Madina Carson, Ralph Java, the summer, Roll send the only send the Novatama, 17 Java. 사제가 책가래 샘진 남는 사제니 책이 고 샘진 탐제 사제리 사제를 잡고 가려 소소로 너게 매박에 고니들이 라진 샘진 탐제 잡다고 그래 너게 강이 가야 매박 고니 샘진 탐제 잡다고 그래 때리 잡고라 그래 때리 때는 라를 하고 잡고라 이제 좀 이제 진사마지나 마하도 건방마도 레이tam들 살네 진수송 이제 깨는데 하고 도시들이 다다 동성권이 상하냐면 걔나 들이는 저 종교 사진 종교에 대선 거래들이 이 노래 용접되는 이 책나서 예리 섭대식 이모공 장마들들이 슬라다 거 용접레스 대타다 또 거를 성구요래 사트 좀 걸로 남트 좀 걸로 인주트 좀 걸로서 대사 저랑래 샘들을 좋고요. 샘들이 차상황 인정고요. 대라들이 책내서 오지요래. 도지 잡고 가서 나디는. 나시 라거로 고알지 상하지는 무슨 소소노래. 책이래. 하달래서 오래. 이 책들은 나시 라거고 나시 가래도들. 내 감성을 감성 샘지 바래. 내가 레이더 지조가 같으니 너 감성이 감대라서 저기 샘적 받아요 말. 샘 광을 아시들이 다다 대식인 보지. 내로 또나 되니 regular 사제에 말습지 고는 전화도 꺼서 뭐라나 돼서 그래. 세부 내로 썩을 하고서 나더니 사항을 루메다 받대. 내 사제 용지 샘을 요구 하고 타고요 그래. 하마고라더니 내가들이 옹자 로버트메 송 사제기 셉진남 사제 옹자 로버트메 가리 답에 저대는 다른 남지가 뭐자 저런 차송들이 저게 또야 요말 저요디 저강에 제도 말들이 저런 노래 제다 로버트메 나오 나바들이 나디 될래 들이 다요벨이 요래 다니니디는 들이 고와 차송송
and so then the next verse, then the vajra holder, the originator of samsara and nirvana. So we have said the vajra is one's own mind, and also in the other songs of the fivefold path of Mahamudra, the verse on the Yidam begins with see your own body as the king, in the form of the king of deities. So this king is because we have a precious human body. And the deity, the form of the deity, is that the form of the deity actually is primordially established within our precious human body, within ourselves. So actually the deity, or the so-called generation stage of the Yidam, the form of the deity is primordially established within us. So that is the king of deities, your own precious human body. And when your mind becomes completely purified, the perfect qualities of such realization arise. So when the mind becomes purified, then it arises as the Yidam deity. And there are many ways to explain the Yidam deity, the generation stage practice. For example, we speak about the visualization and then also the recollection of purity and so on. But so in this song, on the fivefold path of Mahamudra, it says the king-like form of the deity, which is like a clean jewel, the king of all sentient beings. Or the Buddha also had said, all sentient beings are actually Buddhas. So the Buddha is like the king of all sentient beings because the Buddha doesn't experience any suffering. And the Buddha has the ability to protect all sentient beings without any difficulty, effortlessly. So that is why we call him the king or the king-like form of a deity. And so then that verse continues, so unless you arise in the king-like form of the deity, remain within the unborn space, you will not, the unborn changeless space, you will not assemble the subjects of the dakinis. So you will not reign over the subjects of dakinis. Therefore, apply yourself with diligence in the Yidam deity practice. So regarding the generation stage practice in the Vajrayana is practiced in terms of signs, symbols, and their meaning. And when practiced properly, then the practice results in the attainment of enlightenment. But again, it is said that the generation stage or the form of the Yidam is primordially established within you. So that is your true nature. For example, this is also explained in the Kala Chakra teachings. In the Kala Chakra, there is a threefold division of the outer Kala Chakra, the inner Kala Chakra, and the other Kala Chakra. And in there, it also explains that the Yidam is complete within your own mind. And all qualities arise from realizing that. Or to put it into very simple terms, the Drikung Vajra King also explained that in terms of the fivefold path of Mahamudra, and he said, so that was Dhamaraja, and so he said, when you realize that all appearance and existence are the form of the deity, then you have perfected the generation stage of the secret mantra. So this verse really illustrates it in very easy terms. So everything that appears and exists. What is everything that appears and exists? Everything that appears and exists are the three planes of samsaric existence: the form realm, formless realm, and the desire realm. And the mind of all these beings in the three realms is one and the same. Temporarily, due to various karmas and various conditions, they appear as the beings of the three realms, but still there's only one mind. They don't have a separate mind. And the nature of that mind, we call that Buddha nature. In the Samantabhadra prayer, it says, when you recognize this, you are a Buddha. Not recognizing this, you are a sentient being wandering in samsara. Whoever recognizes the natural state of the mind, for them, it is like you're entering a temple and the lights are on. Everything is seen. And what you recognize is that the Buddha, the so-called Buddha, is actually my own mind, nothing else than my own mind. But because we have not recognized that, temporarily we wander in samsara. So therefore the Buddha himself had said, beings are obscured by adventitious stains. So what are these adventitious stains? For example, water freezes at night. When it gets very cold outside, then the water freezes, and then the next morning you can't drink the water because it's frozen, and then it really is useless. You can't do anything with it. So that's this adventitious or this temporary stain. And that is that stain of thinking that an I exists. There is this thought of me that exists, and that we hold on to. And because we perceive a self, there also is a perception of others. And so due to this dualistic perception of self and other, this is how samsara has appeared.
사제때 노도저 말이 풍풍아래에서 풍풍가는 거 뜻이네. 그래서 내 초년들이고 감이 내 초년들이 돼서 아마서 거라 이제 부재해서 풍가는 거 시바사서 때때는 것도 난거 요래. 대를 풍고를 됐다. 노도도 나와서 즉 말해야지. 얘네 대터지 즉 많이 봐 시송스럽 때 다다 나다 다도 노도도 차요래. 나다 다도 좀한테 체배 봐지 토발 사제 잡수 송리 주가래 다 체배 봐지래. 샘지 봐지. 샘지 봐가래. 다지니서 매바 동하고 송들이 대터지 나 동차로 요래. 다지니 매하고 송. 들이 대터지들이 야송다 묘바마이 우보서 세말레 맞아봐. 매바마이 들라 들이 진부이 시제에도 지제 뉴스 포성 줘봐요. 이렇게 다들 들하고서 이렇게라고 차로 이따가를 세고 내lok도 마도 되리 내lok도 상태니 내lok지 봐야 가래 나지님에와 세고는 남가다 웬 발라들이 내 나지님에와 또 남게 되마도는 이 미적들이 때 남저도 가린한 거들 셀이 니마 보는 자 송샤 왔다 왜 니마도 시랍다 왜지 시랍게 파라도 선바되는 시랍게 샘샘서 딱지 당은 이 샘들 들이 냠이 선하고 저거라 사치 족시에 뛰는 밥 들이 롱게 빼다 뛰는 밥 오마스 뛰는 밥 오사 족섬제 대통령 동무적도 되는 들이 돈도 짓해서 내로 그래지 내lok들 남 세고 내록 뭐들 먼지도 뭐 고고요 말이 대사지 네 짓해서 뭐그 나가 내록 따요 제보스 좀 말 똑고죠 나가 세고 내록들 이렇게 고되고 요리 나가 세고 내록도 딱 쳤잖아 오 다지님도 가다 비트지 다지님도 하고 이제 내록도 들세 나와 탐지했더니 플라톤차 거 요리 파테네 요미 딱지들 딱지 로도 잘 줘요. 제외는 일단 나지를 하고 거 이제는 세종왕아데 종왕아데 선봉아래 남세는 뭔가요? 남세는 뭔가 들이 세종왕아 같은 데안에 너는 뭔가다 이 시간 들이 미네 이 시간을 전도해야 되지만 마미는 종왕아 이 시간 유몽가지 요한가지 경마지 유몽가 당마지 이 시간 차을 세종하데 그래서 차들 때때서지 내가 야빈 공소랑 힘이 다을 하 내록시 봤다지 내록시 봐야 가래 네 요바란 말이 요바들은 거 보리 인수지 띵거 치마지 요 말이 뭐 치바들은 종기 요말 사강을 했을 때나 득시 차랍고 뭐도 노도 요 말이 낭따는 나오냐마다 다도 좀 매와 차한 거요리 내 매와지 매봐야만 쉽게 시바사고도 좋은 거리 대로 쌀 동송조 이 뛰어는 나왔던 게더니 저다 나왔던 게랑 그 샘들라리 서두면서 대서 하고는 나와라 항상 하고나 들이다다디 ben 동보찍래 오 거기에 나왔던 게 야가를 봤다 그래지 이따가 사서하고 동시에 오, 들이 나시를 하고 거기 라시바 요바마이 메바마이 송 티처는 로요레 나한테 나 동지 나나 동자를 다 동지 될 무엇도 심었다 자성은 들이 다 와대 또될 무엇도 심한데 대 차당도 받들이 마다 받을 무엇도 심한데 박차죠 그거래 심 차당이 박차죠 그래 잡으실 차내 차파체 박차죠 매번 이도 뭐들 당이 박차죠 대지 냠들이 먹지 그 셈은 동양을 세지 소화를 뒤들이 박차죠 박차 자리 딱 가래 따스함 누가 뉴모보다를 랑살지 컨트롤랑들이 농가를 안쳤다비 자버려 하고서 그때 뉴모 가래질 강야요 말이 나또 죽을 틈마서 내룩실들이 나진이 말다가 신들이 나또 돌라고 요리 출발 하고래 대도 하고 그랬더니 내룩시바 나시 잡을 거지도 오 조왕아들 살이 넘어가래 남sem은 용망아도 대지를 산속생은 최소 나지니 매와 차는도 나지니 매너들이 나동차고 나동들이 대제들이 통일거든 나동들 사동 나동 사동 들이 말이 배송료에 범자들이 네 모토를 추가해서 대화기를 longo 정도 싸와기를 쫓고 정도 됐다 지금 감대스 쫓고 돼 내가 들이 좀 하다가 랑고던 심마들이 좀 하다가 차를 대탑제 동대 여기 샷도 싸우는 동안 들이 요빨이면지 매빨이면지 대탑을 들어가니 들이 나시 사걸 무슨 차대요래 들이 무거운 심마지는 들이 안 소소로 동에 속을 대가면 체크요래 대회는 들이 다 나시 사걸 고발주는 것들이 눈이 원서 예담 제콜라서 눈이 대도 적대로 삼아 적대로 들이 또 타말바티 마시와 타게지 동고거나 다들이 이제리니 당고 잡도 들이 세지지 들이 예담라 들이 제르무검 들이 이제 다 들이 뒤에서 다과 다리 다들이 제르무를 줘 들이 이제 도로이 받쳐서 하는 들이 그런 들이 이제 다서 들이 다도 다져가리 니지 다오라 들 참아가래 다음을 요래 이때 돌리는 그다음 쟁콜 라서 그다음에 콜을 라지 때다 랑이를 또 돈이 오를 좀 대당 나시 잡을 거 같이 동치 받지 좀 차대요래 뒤들들 돌아간 거래지
So this verse, understand that everything that appears and exists is the form of the deity, is also related to the understanding of the Kala chakra. So in the Kala chakra, for example, it says the outer Kala chakra is the limitless universe, and the inner Kala chakra is to understand that the universe is complete within a single person's body and mind. So the entire world, the entire universe is all completed, all included within the body of a single person. So therefore the body of a person and the outer universe are of the same substance, are the same. So this is actually how we can understand it in quite simple terms. And so that is because the outer body, one's physical body, is composed of the 5 elements. The earth element is the flesh and the bones and so on, and the water element is the various liquids in the body, and the fire element is the body heat, and the wind element is the breath. And then the space element is the mind. And so that is what we call the aggregate or the aggregates. And the Buddha said that the aggregates are, the aggregate meaning one's body is not one solid thing. And this is how the Buddha introduced the nature of the 5 aggregates. Also that is explained in the new tantric system, in the Chakrasamvara practice. It says in that practice, there's a section where we need to recognize the nature of the aggregates, elements, and sense sources. So the point is that the aggregate or one's body is not one solid thing. And those who don't understand that, those who don't know that, identify with their body. They think that this is me. So there is this sense of an I that arises. And so when we practice, first we take refuge in the Buddha, and then we cultivate the 4 immeasurables, Bodhichitta, and then we practice and finally realize that self and other do not exist inherently in the mind. And all appearance is empty of self-nature. And that realization arises when you realize that there is no distinction, no delineation between self and other. And then all appearances appear just like a rainbow in the sky. You cannot say that they actually possess any true substantial existence. They do not possess any substance, any material substance to them. They don't inherently exist. So even though you can't say they really exist, you can also not say that they do not exist, because like the form of the deity, for instance, while it clearly appears, it lacks inherent existence, and even though it is ungraspable, it has no substance, the deity still possesses the qualities of omniscience, of wisdom, of love, and of the power to grant protection. So what that all comes down to, realizing or not realizing this, depends on whether or not one has seen the nature of the mind. So what is the nature of the mind? The nature of the mind is free from a duality of self and other. The mind is just like space, ultimately. And even though it lacks substantial inherent existence, it still manifests, appears. For example, it is just like the sun shining upon a crystal and rainbow lights then emerging from it. The sun is one's wisdom, or the perfection of wisdom. So the way we realize the nature of the mind is, for example, through the practice lineage of blessings. We see the mind on the basis of the views of Mahamudra or Dzogchen. Or if we follow the path of scriptures and reasoning, the Madhyamaka or the middle way, then there's the middle way of ascertaining the nature of the mind. But ultimately, even though there are these 3 ways of ascertaining the mind, the essence is always the same. And Chikden Somgön had said, all it is just the nature of your mind, to put it in simple terms, even though we give it different names. Actually, he said that the nature of the mind doesn't have a name. And therefore, Chikden Somgön said that the realization of the true nature of the mind remains untouched by the 3 great ones. I'm referring to Mahamudra, Dzogchen, and Madhyamaka. So all it is just the nature of the mind. And this is something we can understand. So we need to realize that the nature of mind is without this duality of self and other. And when one realizes that, then all outer appearances will appear as empty. That's what we call the unity of appearance and emptiness. And appearance and emptiness transcends existence and non-existence. So what appears can neither said to be existing, nor can it said to be non-existing. And so this reasoning here corresponds to the previous verse of understand that all appearance and existence is the form of the deity. So the universe consists of the 5 elements, and these are by nature the 5 female Buddhas. And then inside of the mind we have the 5 afflictive emotions, and they are connected to the 5 outer elements. And then when these 5 afflictions mature, then they mature into the 5 kinds of wisdom. As long as we are in an immature, unripened state, there are just the 5 afflictions and the 5 ordinary elements. So the 5 elements and the 5 afflictions are like the stale or the stale part of the mind, and or the kind of the elements. The stale quality of the elements are the 5 ordinary elements, meaning that the pure essence of the elements actually is the 5 female Buddhas or the 5 wisdoms. So therefore, we say that the elements and the inner mind in their pure state, matured state, are the 5 dhyani Buddhas, male and female, so the Yapa and the Yum. So all those who have realized the nature of the mind recognize that what they have realized is that what appears lacks inherent existence. So they do not grasp at the true concrete existence of appearances. They can see that whatever appears is substanceless, is ungraspable. And for example, if you were to take Earth, dissect it into its finest particle, you would not find the finest particle. And so similarly, you cannot find a self. And so they have realized that the self does not exist. It is ungraspable, just like all appearances are. And yet, even though there is a lack of existence, it is not that there is nothing to, because there is clear knowing awareness. And that is referred to as the unity of clarity and emptiness, or appearance and emptiness. In the 37 Bodhisattva practices, it says, appearances, or the way things appear, is your own mind. So when you understand that, you know that all of your perceptions are the projections of yourself, your own mind. And that is similar to the previous example of the big tree that has one trunk, which is the unity of samsara and nirvana. And then the various appearances of samsara and nirvana are the branches and the leaves and the root and so forth. So if you understand the true meaning of the Vajrayana, then you understand the meaning of saying all appearance and existence are the divine form of the deity. And the deity, as we have said, neither exists nor does it not exist. That is the meaning of appearance emptiness. All appearances, all your perceptions are empty. All sounds are empty. That is when there is no grasping at the true concrete existence of appearances and your concepts about them, then the mind remains in a pure and empty state. Otherwise, if we do grasp at the concrete existence of appearances and the reality of our ideas about them, then we will develop many thoughts of attachment and anger. And we will place impure karmic imprints into our mind, because we will become attached to what we think is pleasant, and that places an imprint in the mind. And then we will have an aversion against what we find is negative or unpleasant. And that also places an imprint into our mind. And then not seeing that what is actually happening, that we are constantly placing these imprints in the mind, is ignorance. The unawareness, not noticing that we constantly accumulate these imprints, that is ignorance. And a sign of that is that, for example, we get afflicted instantly. For example, we get so angry, and in the end, we even want to commit suicide. So if you really understand that, someone who understands that they might become afflicted, but even though an affliction arises, they will not cling to this affliction and believe that it is true. And when they just let it be, it will dissolve into the Dharmakaya. So if you know that, if you know the truth of these thoughts, then it's actually very easy to liberate them. The truth of these thoughts is that they do not actually exist. They are delusions, a confused state of mind, not a reality. So that is also the meaning that relates to the verse of realize that all appearance and existence is the divine form of the deity. So again, on the outer level, we have the 5 elements, which are the 5 dakinis, And on the inner level, we have the 5 afflictive emotions. And when you give rise to bodhicitta, then the perception of self and other will fall apart. And when that falls apart, you will realize the empty nature of appearances, of your perception of appearances. And so that is what we call the unity of appearance and emptiness, or clarity and emptiness. Milarepa had said that when one meditates, then from non-conceptuality arises the Dharmakaya. From bliss arises the Sambhogakaya. And from clarity arises the Nirmanakaya. And the Nirmanakaya is a form emanation that appears in the world, for example, temporarily, like an illusion. So it seems like a really existing thing, but that is just because we believe in the concrete existence of appearances. In reality, these emanations lack any true inherent existence. So if you continue on within that state where you do not grasp at the true existence of anything, nor do you grasp at the non-existence of anything, then all appearance and existence appears as the divine form of the deity in a very direct way to you. And on the other hand, if you cling to the true existence of your perceptions of appearances and your thoughts, your ideas about them, you will encounter only suffering and difficulty. Anyone will. So it is said that the mandala of the Yidam deity is primordially established within you. An ordinary person doesn't understand that. And for ordinary people to realize this, they first take refuge, and then they cultivate a mind of bodhicitta, and then from within that kind of pure state of mind, they generate the deity, or they visualize the Yidam deity. And then there are many ways of explaining the form of the deity. Each part of the deity has a pure meaning, so we recollect the purity. And as we progress in our practice, one by one, we are purifying our obscurations, which is just like washing an old piece of clothing. And slowly, as you keep washing it, it becomes more and more pure. And then the ultimate purity then is when you have completely removed all dualistic grasping, all dualistic perception. And that is a gradual process. And finally, you realize that the mandala of Yidam deities is primordially established within you. Primordially means naturally. It is your true nature. By nature, it is established within you. And so that kind of verse, and the other verse where we said all appearance and existence are the form of the deity, and these verses all have one and the same meaning. And so you should also discuss the meaning of that with each other. A long life to everyone who followed on the live stream, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining our winter teachings. We will resume tomorrow at 9 a.m. again with His Eminence Garchen Rinpoche. See you then. Be well and stay safe.